Hey everybody, welcome back to rotocurve.com. I'm Josh Kalachi, once again here to discuss Week 15's NFL cash game picks on FanDuel. In this video, you will see guys that are safe, guys that we like to target for head-to-heads, 50-50s. These are the guys that don't have that really high ceiling or low floor, but these are the guys that have that high floor that can get you the points that you need to take you over the cash line in 50-50s, double ups, and to help you win your matchups and head-to-heads. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Three quarterbacks I like this week in cash games are Russell Wilson, Carson Palmer, and a cheaper guy in Alex Smith. Now, first things first about Russell Wilson. To say that he's been incredible in the last couple of weeks is probably the understatement of the year. Last week I talked about how I rarely pay up for quarterbacks in cash game just because I think there's value to be had at other positions. But I do think that Wilson is the guy that you can pay up for. I said that last week, and I don't disagree with it again this week, simply because the guy has just been incredible. He has 25.4, 35.2, 34.06, and 32.28 FanDuel points in the last 4 games. And I think that consistency is going to continue, and his upside has been shown simply because Marshawn Lynch and Thomas Rawls now are out with injuries. I don't think that Bryce Brown or Christian Michael or even Fred Jackson are going to take that many carries away from the game plan. I do think the Seattle Seahawks are going to throw the ball a lot, and that bodes well in a great matchup against the Browns. Cleveland has given up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this season, and they've given up 15 touchdowns in the last 6 games. So with Russell Wilson coming in, that defense is struggling in the secondary. I look for that to continue, and I also look for Wilson's unbelievable trend to continue with throwing touchdown passes left and right. If you don't want to spend on Russell Wilson but want a guy at a similar price point, maybe you don't trust Wilson's ability to throw the ball for 5-6 straight games, but Carson Palmer is a guy that's very safe as well at 8,700. If you don't trust Wilson, like I was just saying, Palmer has been one of the most consistent options in the NFL this season. He has at least 17 FanDuel points in each of the last 9 games. He is one of the leaders in the NFL in touchdown passes and passing yards. And he's also a GPP option. Now, we'll talk about that in another video, but he is a solid GPP option if you wanted to stack him with other of his wide receivers like Michael Floyd, Larry Fitzgerald, or John Brown. But for cash games, I do like him against this Eagles secondary, who have allowed 19 touchdown passes in the last 6 games. And as we were discussing earlier with Russell Wilson and his incredible pace, Carson Palmer is right there in terms of passing fantasy points, and he is cheaper. So if you wanted to trust a guy that throws more from the pocket and definitely throws more overall in the game, I believe Palmer has thrown for over 36 or 37 attempts in each of the last 10 games. If you want to trust the volume rather than a guy who's been incredibly efficient in Russell Wilson, Palmer is also an excellent play. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those. For those of you that don't like to spend up on quarterbacks in cash games, I think Alex Smith is the target here. At just $7,000, he's $2,800 or $2,700 less than the previous 2 guys we mentioned. He's over $2,000 less than some of the top price guys like the Bradys of the world and the Rodgers of the world. And the thing about Alex Smith is he's not going to get you 30, 35 fantasy points, but what he can get you is 15 or more, and that's exactly what we're looking for at cash game, especially at just $7,000. He has at least 2 times his salary, which is what we're targeting most times on FanDuel and cash games, in 8 of his last 10 games. And the Chiefs have an excellent matchup against the Ravens, who have among the league's worst pass defenses. Only the Saints have given up more FanDuel points per game through the air. So the Ravens are definitely a secondary to target. Considering Alex Smith at just $7,000 has been playing well and does have that top matchup, he makes for an excellent option in cash games if you did want to spend up at other positions. Moving on to running back, 2 guys here I want to discuss in detail are David Johnson and Denard Robinson. Neither one of these guys were starting running backs when the season began, but as you guys all very well know, the NFL is a game of injuries, especially to running backs, so a lot of things change. And the one thing about these 2 is you can have both of them for just $12,800 against the cap, which is huge because then it allows you to spend at other positions. The reason why I like Johnson this week is because it looks like Ellington's going to be out again, so Johnson is going to have the lion's share of the touches. Bruce Arians expects him to get 20 or more touches again, which bodes well for his fantasy value, especially at just $6,500. He faces an Eagles team who was very good against the run earlier in the season, but of late they have just given up a ton of fantasy points to opposing running backs. They've given up 5 straight games of at least 20 FanDuel points, and considering the fact that the Eagles have basically turned their defense around in terms of what they've been doing against the run and the pass, The one thing about that defense is they have Fletcher Cox, Benny Logan, and Cedric Thornton in the middle. But for some reason, they've struggled against the run. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that they've struggled since Jordan Hicks went out to an injury. So with David Johnson at 6,500 against a team that has allowed passing fantasy points to running backs, rushing fantasy points to running backs, all kinds of stuff, it makes for an excellent option. I think he will be the highest owned running back this week at 6,500. Denard Robinson at 6,300 is an interesting option because he's going to take over for T.J. Yeldon, who I all but expect to miss this game. He's about 99.9% out. He said that he sprained an MCL in the Jaguars game in Week 14, so I don't see how he's going to play. And that bodes well for Robinson as he looks to be the feature back in a great matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta has given up nearly 5 yards per carry, which is among the best in the NFL, or worse in the NFL, but best if you're targeting Robinson. The most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs at 15. And they've given up 88 catches to opposing backs this season as well, which is also the most in the NFL. So considering the fact that when the Jaguars don't run the ball, and they do run the ball between, I believe, 18 and 23 times a game, they like to pass the ball. And knowing Blake Bortles and how has been successful this year, a lot of those have come in dump off passes and little short passes, along with throwing deep to Hearns and Allen Robinson. So Denard Robinson actually has some value in the passing game as well. And as you can tell, the Atlanta Falcons have given up a ton of catches, and that just bodes even better for a guy like Robinson, who at just 6,300 doesn't need that many points to achieve his expected return in value. The one thing about Robinson last week, as you saw, is he's actually very efficient, was good with his touches. After Yeldon went down to an injury, he had 15 touches for 87 yards. He did score a touchdown and on a goal line carry. So it does show that the Jaguars plan on using him in a featured back role on the goal line on third downs and everything. So he has a great matchup, and at just 6,300, he makes for an excellent option if he does start, which I do expect him to. Other running backs worth using this week are Tim Hightower, who is the guy that gets a ton of carries for the Saints now with Mark Ingram out, and James White, who will be the featured back in the backfield, I believe, for the Patriots, as the Tennessee Titans are excellent against the run, but they do struggle against the pass. So the one thing about the Patriots is they do like to exploit matchups. Considering Tennessee stuffs the run, they're going to be looking to use White out of the backfield a lot, which does bode well in cash games and in GPPs for running back. Moving on to wide receiver, three guys I like here are very similar in what they've been doing in production of late, but the one thing about them is they vary a lot in price. Now, Golden Tate and Jeremy Maclin have been incredible, but the one guy I want to talk about this week, excuse me, is Julio Jones, because when you look at the top-tier receivers, a lot of people want to have at least one of them in their lineups. Odell Beckham gets Josh Norman this week. Antonio Brown gets the Denver secondary, which is either Chris Harris or Aqib Talib, both excellent cover guys. A.J. Green has a backup quarterback in A.J. McCarron, and DeAndre Hopkins gets Vontae Davis. So with all those top-tier options having tough matchups, it makes it easy to go down and spend on who may be the biggest mismatch in the NFL in terms of ability, and that's Julio Jones at 8,600 against the Jaguars. Of the top receivers, like I just mentioned, Julio has the best matchup simply because the Jaguars don't have anybody that can defend him, and they don't have any top-tier corners like the Talibs, like the Chris Harrises, Vontae Davises, or Norman, like the other guys do have. The Jazz covering defensive backs are Devon House, Aaron Colvin, and Josh Evans. All three of them are 6 feet even, so Julio has at least 4 inches on him. Some people list him 6'5". Some people say 6'3". But if you watch him play, he definitely has a size advantage over pretty much, excuse me, any of those defensive backs for the Jags. The one thing about the Jaguars is they do use Evans, who is the free safety, in coverage a lot. So when they like to move some of those guys down, the coach for the Jaguars and Gus Bradley does like to use a similar cover 3 or cover 4 formation, which he does have all of his corners go deep. But when they do have 4 or 5 wide, he likes to move the safeties over. And a guy like Evans does struggle to defend the deep ball. So if he ends up on Julio Jones or like the other guys, I think Julio could have a huge game. He has not scored a touchdown in, I believe, 5 weeks, it says, which is interesting because he's a guy that's been scoring touchdowns his whole career. So I expect that to progress. I think his touchdown regression is not a big thing. And considering the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary doesn't have anyone to cover him, I think he does score a touchdown this week. And he's a little bit cheaper than those top options. So he is my top guy at quarterback or at wide receiver this week on FanDuel. The other 2 guys are 2 volume catchers that have actually been scoring touchdowns of late as well. That's Golden Tate and Jeremy Maclin. Tate gets the New Orleans Saints, and I know the first thing everybody's thinking of is, oh, wow, you got to look at Calvin Johnson against the Saints. The Saints secondary have been terrible. But listen to this. There's a cornerback for the Saints by the name of Delvin Breaux, who has it's an incredible story. I believe he had a neck injury. He almost didn't play in high school or college, but he did coming back. He has a lot of talent, and he's showing that talent as he's allowed. I've seen some tweets that people have said he's allowed 1 yard in the last 3 games. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but he has been playing very well, and it looks like the potential that he showed as a high school and college player is starting to come out. So that could scare people off of Calvin Johnson. Now, Breaux has not shown the reason to shadow the opposing receiver. When Rob Ryan was there, they did have him do that, but since he's left, they've kind of kept Brandon Browner on one side and Delvin Breaux on the other. And I do expect Golden Tate, who's a guy I'm looking at in cash games, to be on Browner or in the slot. So he's going to be staying away from Breaux, and I think that makes him an excellent option at 6,900. Tate has 32 catches in the last 4 games. There's no less than 8.3 FanDuel points in the last 6 games. So he has been consistent. He has a carry in each of the last 2 games as well. So that gives him just an added boost. And at just 6,900 in a terrific matchup, he makes for an excellent play. The next guy is Jeremy Maclin, who has 24 catches for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And his only poor games this season, I went and looked back at his schedule, have come against elite cornerbacks like Jason Verrett, Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, and Xavier Rhodes. All the other ones, he's been very successful, and considering the stats he's had in the last 3 weeks, it's proven that he does have the ability to have some big games. And at 6,700 this week, he makes for an excellent option against the Ravens defense, who we did discuss before with Alex Smith. They do struggle a ton, the wide receivers. They've given up the most fantasy points in the NFL to the position, so it's definitely something to look at. And at just 6,700, you can pair Maclin with Alex Smith in your cash game for a little bit of a stack if you wanted to be risky. And if they connect for a touchdown, you're looking at a huge game of production between the 2 of those. Other guys I want to consider in cash games are Kamar Aiken against Kansas City and Stevie Johnson against the Miami Dolphins. Moving on to the last but certainly not least position and on FanDuel, and that is tight end. 2 guys I like this week are Jordan Reed and Ben Watson. I want to talk about Watson first, and then I'll get into Reed, because I do think Reed is the guy I'll be targeting the most. Watson has flourished this season in the, I don't want to say the Jimmy Graham role, because he hasn't been anywhere close to that production, but he has seen the role of the Saints tight end, and he's done very well. He has 61 catches for 712 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, his touchdowns could be a bit higher, but considering he has the safety of those catches and yards, it makes for a decent game or a decent play in cash game, because he has a pretty good matchup against the Detroit Lions. They've given up among the top 5 most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. And Watson has been safe, as we just discussed with all those receptions. He has at least 4 catches and 7 in the last 8 games. And considering the fact that he has scored a touchdown in, I believe, 2 of the last 3, it gives him the ability to have that extra 6 points, which you may need, considering if you're not going to be using a guy like Jordan Reed or Rob Gronkowski. Now let's talk about Reed real quick. Reed has been the guy in the passing game for the Redskins, especially with Kirk Cousins under center. He's called 67 passes for just under 700 yards and 7 touchdowns while only playing 11 games. He did miss some games due to injury. And one thing about the Buffalo Bills defense, who the Redskins faced this week, they've allowed some big games to opposing tight ends. When you look overall, they've done very well. But you have to look at the games where opposing offenses use their tight end, because not everybody in the NFL does do that. In games against the Patriots, Titans, Bengals, Chiefs, and Eagles, the Bills have given up at least 12 FanDuel points in 4 of those 5 games. And that shows that they are susceptible to tight ends that are being used, and that's exactly what Jordan Reed is. And considering he's among the target leaders at the position, I think he's a safe cash game play, considering he has a lot of catches, yards, and touchdowns, and is that top option in the receiving game. Pretty much wraps up our video for this week in NFL cash game plays on FanDuel. Thank you for watching. And as always, be sure to give us a thumbs up so we continue to bring you tons of analysis each and every week. As always, be sure to go check out rotocurve.com. There are free tools. There's a new updated NFL page with all the tools, research information, analysis like this, and more. And it's all free, so be sure to go over there, check it out, and let's make this one and everyone a successful week of NFL on FanDuel. Good luck, everybody.